Today I'm going to show you step by step how I layer textures to paint this mountain scene. Mountains are amazing subjects, but they're difficult. It's hard to see the texture of the mountain and simplify and still make it look believable. I laid in my drawing and I'm wetting down the back of my paper and the front of my paper. Now, I'm going to need to do this in a couple phases. Typically in most scenes, we paint the sky in the lightest values and then we move on to other things. The challenge is some of the stone is lighter than the sky. So when I am painting the sky, I need to ensure that it is dark enough and strong enough where it will let the face of the rock that's in light really stand out. As I typically do, I'm wetting down both sides of the paper. I start with the face of the mountain first. And I know that this is where I want the light to be, so I'm laying in a nice wet into wet wash of raw sienna and some lavender. And I laid in a little bit of green color for the roof of the house, and that is some cobalt turquoise and raw sienna. And now it's time to paint the sky. So what I did here was I laid in a little bit of lavender for the little wispy cloud. And now I'm going to paint blue, the blue of the sky, and negatively paint that cloud in. And so that's what that looks like. So this is still wet, and some of the blue might drift down onto the face of the mountain. But that's okay. I can lift some of that off if I need to. And plus there are some dark areas of the mountain that will define that edge. So I'll be going over a lot of that mountain again. So I added a little more strength at the top of the mountain, some cobalt blue, and I needed a little bit more cobalt blue and strength around the face of the mountain. And so I'm laying that in while all of that is damp, understanding that some of that might drift over into the face of the stone, and that's just something I'll have to deal with. I can lift it off. So now that we're down to the base of the mountain, I'm introducing some green for the grass down there, some cobalt turquoise and some raw sienna, a little more cadmium yellow and saturation here in the middle ground of the scene, and I'm working my way down to the foreground. In this scene, as I get into the middle ground and foreground, I do add a little bit more variety within this first wet into wet wash. And this is what it looks like once everything is dried. Now let's talk about the middle values of the scene. The part of the mountain that is in shadow, there is a lot of detail on the face of this mountain. I'm going to, as much as I can, try and squint and see connections in that complicated mess of shapes. And so I'm going to start over here on the left, and I'll show you what I mean as we get into this. I'm using a little bit of ultramarine blue, some raw sienna, and some lavender, or some rose madder permanent as well. And you'll see it's very easy to see every little separate thing, but I'm trying to paint this in a very connected way. And after I establish this first bit of the stone, I go ahead and I move over into this area. Now this part of the mountain is closer to us and it needs to be more in light. I'm not going as dark over the top of that, but I'm trying to still find some connection. So I'm kind of dry brushing and doing some broken marks. I want more texture on this face of the mountain that's closer to us and less in the back here. We're getting into some of the trees and I'm letting the trees just melt into this as well. And I'm using some cobalt turquoise and some raw sienna. And this took a lot of time and attention to kind of break up the area and think about value and edge all at the same time. This is an important step down here. When I get to this house down here, I want the shadow side of the house to connect right in to the green that I'm already painting. So I'm painting around the light areas, but see the shadow under the house there and on the side. I want all that to connect right in to this shape. And I'm working my way back up the mountain. And you see the difference in texture. There's smaller, more broken up marks here, simplified brushwork in the background. And that's going to help this face of the mountain feel closer to us. And even though there's a lot of information, that will feel a little further away. Connecting the greens up the side of the mountain and showing some of the texture of the trees. I'm using my calligraphy brush. That allows me to use the side of it and get some broken edges to get these little trees up here and marks like this as well. A little more attention and texture. And the trick about the scene was just to take my time with it and keep stepping back, checking in with your painting. Is this coming forward? Is the background sitting in the back? Always checking in throughout the process. And while this is damp, I can go in and add a few little more darks around the house and some darks here. We don't want this whole thing to look like one flat shape. As we get closer to us, we need a little more contrast and a little more detail. Okay, so this little wash here was important. It helped establish the road. This wash is raw sienna, cobalt turquoise. The part where it's a little more saturated, I have some cadmium yellow in that. So that little bit of detail, that texture is needed to bring this area forward and to, again, let that mountain feel like it's more in the background with more simple shapes, more complicated as we get into the middle ground. And a few more darks and shadows and details here will help get that feeling of scale and allow this to feel further away. I did scratch in a little line. There's a power line leading into that house. I thought that was a nice little touch. And this is what the painting looks like after I got the darks and the details into this area. And now I can take a step back and see what else is needed to finish up this scene. Trying to direct the eye. I needed a little more attention on the face of that rock, a few more darks on these bushes. You can't tell this from the video, but this was probably the next day that I came in and looked at this. So I know we really want to hurry and finish our paintings, but when you've been really thinking hard and working for an hour, hour and a half, maybe 2 hours, it's okay to get it close, get the painting about to 90%, and then step away for a day and come back. You'll be amazed at how you see things differently when your mind is more fresh and when your eyes are fresh. So don't be afraid. Don't rush to get that painting out on social media. Take a little break, get it to 90%, come back. You'll be happier with the decisions that you make because in this medium, you can get carried away with detail and you can make a mistake and overwork something and there's really no coming back when it gets to that point. So a little more attention on the top of the mountain. And you see, I felt like we had so much going on here and then it just dropped into nothing. So here I'm giving a little bit more detail and then letting it just become more and more simple as we recede into the distance. I did tweak the foreground a little bit. I felt like this was a little bit weak, and if I could darken this up a little bit, it would push the viewer's eye into the scene. And I felt like that did the trick. And now we have a nice foreground leading into a middle ground that has a lot of attention, and then simplifying the further back we get into the scene. And here's a look at the finished painting. And I hope that seeing my process is helpful for you, and also knowing that this is not easy stuff, right? This takes a lot of work. This takes practice. And the more that you show up and the more patience you can bring to your practice, the better off that you're going to be in the long run. Have you ever been really excited about a painting and you get all set up, you find that right reference that you're excited about, and then it's time to go and you feel lost? I have a free resource that I want to give to you today that can help with these problems. My 5 steps to plan a successful watercolor painting. I walk you through the crucial planning phase of your painting that will help you understand what you're going to paint first, second, and third. The planning is really so important, especially in watercolor. This medium is harder to correct. It's so immediate. So having that plan is very important. I send you a PDF that you can download. And the great thing about this is you can have it on your phone, you could print it out, and you can take a look at these crucial planning steps before you start each painting. All you have to do is follow this link here and download my 5-step guide to planning a successful watercolor painting.